about 150 years before the birth of Jesus.
Now, this lesson will be about how today we live in the cities, and we live in a private society which we call countries, and in this societies we become less than what we are, and not using the same principles our ancestors did, and we behave in a manner that's unbecoming of us, to where everything about us is just horrible. So in today's age, we're missioned with uniting with each other, creating bonds, and taking ourselves out of the inner cities and beginning to shed off all that makes us who we have become through our experiences. This is to help you grow and to connect your bond to the ultimate source, the Creator. So this video will be showcasing that. It's a short video, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about it first, so you know what you're getting into. This is in the Bible, and the Bible states we must go out into the mountains, and go and make that connection and take ourselves away from the population that's perverting us and cleanse ourselves, whether it be in the desert or the forest. He says he's in the forest, the mountains.
The Greek influence of Alexander the Great's empire, which had taken over Israel, began to seep into the cultural context itself. And increasingly there was a struggle between those people who wanted to maintain.
So sometimes we think, enslavement, but in actuality, a lot of times when we were in places like that, we had money. We could buy stuff, we could rent places. We worked. We understand, but in this place in Rome, we were doing what we are doing today. A lot of things that go against the natural law of things. And we're doing the same thing there. So these people had the same idea. And this is where we get the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is why the Dead Sea Scrolls is not touched by the Roman hands. That's why John D. Allegro, when he translated it and couldn't find Jesus or Christianity, he was barred from ever working again. And they had pro-Christian translators come in and translate the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the forms they seen, the papers they found, and the inscriptions they found are our ancestors' knowledge without much of the perversions we have today. Let's check it out.
A biblical worldview, complete devotion to God, submission to His will, live for His glory, love your neighbor. We could call those the Hebrew emphasis people. And Hellenism, the Greek way that says life is about me, it's about getting what I want, it's about pleasure, it's about enjoyment, it's about relaxation. Basically, I set myself up as the goal of life. Now, that worldview, that Hellenistic worldview, particularly influenced around 150 BC and on the priesthood. The priests who functioned in God's temple in Jerusalem were to a certain extent, maybe even a large extent, caught up in that worldview. In fact, in 150 BC, the high priesthood, which God had carefully structured, was sold for money to a particular individual who was clearly Hellenistic. Now, in that context, there were godly priests who decided that was so bad, that was so wrong, that they were going to create an alternative. And so they came out into the desert to create a community that would be faithful to God, would be in training as a priesthood, so that when the time came, when, as they thought, the Messiah came, that corrupt priesthood would be replaced, and there would be a priesthood that would take its place, after the order, apparently, of Melchizedek. And that's this community. They did not want to mingle with that pagan, corrupt culture. They wanted to keep themselves pure. Sort of, I think, what they thought God had been doing with Israel in the wilderness in the Hebrew Bible, where he brought them into the wilderness for 40 years, isolated them from the Egyptian and Canaanite cultures, and molded and shaped a generation that was ready then to do what he wanted. Like Israel in the desert had to learn to live by every word that comes from the mouth of God, they came out here to say, we're going to live by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So this text was the heart and soul of what this community was. And you've all heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls and understand the Dead Sea Scrolls, many of which are biblical texts or studies of biblical texts, are their attempt to live by every word that comes from the mouth of God.
About Psalm 78, 17 through 19. Deuteronomy 8 and 3 goes. I'm going to bring it up on the Septuagint. And he afflicted thee, and strengthened thee with hunger, and fed thee with manna, which thy fathers knew not, that he might teach thee that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God shall man live. And over here it says, he humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that people do not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of Ha. So, if you look at my people, I was just reading something about the flood in the Hawaiian, from a Hawaiian chief. Couple hundred, they migrated there. I don't know, but the thing that's curious to me was that the Hawaiian people never live off bread. They lived off what they called fruit. And you take it out of the ground, you boil it, and you crush it with a stone, and it creates like a paste, or like a pudding, and we call it poi. And the crazy thing about it is we invented this from, and they say that we invented it so that we could use it on our voyaging, because the good thing about poi is it doesn't go bad. It has a lot longer lifespan, and all it does is just get more sour, but you can still eat it. And it's a good probiotic and everything. Poi, that there's dry land poi, there's wet land pois, something. But you guys have a good one.